I'm sitting here at 3 a.m. in the SpaceX facility, and the hum of the rockets outside should feel like victory, but instead, it feels like the loneliest sound in the world. You know what's funny? I can calculate the trajectory to Mars down to the millimeter. I can design neural networks that interface with the human brain, but I can't figure out how to stop feeling like that scared kid in South Africa who got thrown down a flight of stairs by his classmates. Yeah, that really happened. I was hospitalized. And you want to know the worst part? When I came home, I didn't find comfort there either. My father, the things he said to me, the things he made me believe about myself, I still can't repeat them without feeling that same crushing weight in my chest. So I built a fortress. Not out of stone, but out of ambition. People see the Tesla factories, the starships, the billions of dollars, and they think I've got it all figured out. They think success heals everything. But here's what my future wife needs to know. What she deserves to know before she ever considers spending her life with me. I'm terrified of being alone. Not physically alone. I'm surrounded by people every single day. Engineers, executives, reporters, people who need decisions and answers and direction. But emotionally, I feel like I'm floating in space without a tether, just drifting further and further from anything real. 3 divorces. 3 times I stood there and promised forever. 3 times I failed. And each time, I told myself the same lie. Next time will be different. Next time, I'll balance it better. Next time, I won't let the work consume everything. But I did. Every single time. There's this moment that haunts me. It was a Tuesday. I remember because we had a board meeting that morning. I was married to my second wife, or was it the third? God, even that detail feels like evidence of my failure. We were having breakfast, or trying to, and she was telling me about something important, something about her sister, or her friend, or maybe her own feelings. I honestly can't remember. And I was there, physically present, eating my toast, nodding at what I thought were the right moments, but my mind was already at the factory. I was mentally redesigning a battery configuration, solving a problem that didn't need to be solved at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. And she stopped mid-sentence and just looked at me with these eyes that were somehow both furious and resigned, and she said, "You're not even here, are you?" I lied and said I was. She knew. They always know. That's when I started to understand something that would take me years to fully accept. I use work the way some people use alcohol or drugs. It's my escape, my armor, my reason to not deal with the messy, unpredictable, utterly terrifying world of human emotion. When I'm solving an engineering problem, there's a right answer. Variables behave predictably. Physics doesn't change its mind or need emotional validation or get hurt when I'm distracted, but people, love, that's chaos theory in its purest form, and I've spent my entire life trying to eliminate chaos. My future wife needs to know that when she finds me at my desk at midnight, staring at schematics or code or financial projections, I'm not just working. I'm hiding. I'm retreating to the one place where I feel competent, where I feel like I understand the rules. Here's something I've never said publicly. After my first divorce, I didn't eat a proper meal for 3 weeks. I lost 15 pounds. Not because I was too busy, I made time for a product launch during those same 3 weeks, but because sitting down to eat felt like admitting I was alone. So I'd grab protein bars between meetings, or forget entirely, and I'd tell myself I was being efficient. I was optimizing my time. But really? I was just too heartbroken to face an empty chair across from me. And the thing is, no one knew. I showed up to every meeting, sharp, prepared, aggressive even. Because that's what you do when you're me, right? You compartmentalize. You put the pain in a box and you label it deal with later, and then later never comes because there's always another crisis, another deadline, another reason to postpone feeling. My father once told me, and I've never forgotten this. It's burned into my memory like a scar, that I would never amount to anything. That I was foolish, useless, that every idea I had was stupid. I was maybe 14 years old, and you know what I did? I believed him. Not on the surface, not in a way that stopped me from building companies or chasing dreams, but deep down, in that place where we keep our secret truths about ourselves, I believed him. So every success became a way to prove him wrong. Every company, every innovation, every impossible goal achieved, was me screaming into the void, "See, I'm not useless." But here's the sick irony. No amount of external validation can fix internal wounds. I could own Mars itself and still hear his voice in my head during quiet moments. And those quiet moments? I avoid them like they're radioactive. I fill every second with something: emails, projects, reading scientific papers, scrolling through memes on my phone at 2 a.m. because silence means thinking, and thinking means feeling, and feeling means remembering that I'm actually just deeply, profoundly lonely. People magazine once called me one of the most eligible bachelors in the world. I read that and actually laughed out loud, alone in my house, because they have no idea. They don't know that I've spent countless nights texting friends at ungodly hours, just to feel connected to someone. They don't know that I've refreshed my messages obsessively, hoping anyone is thinking about me for reasons that have nothing to do with Tesla, stock prices, or rocket launches. My mother, May, she's incredible. She survived an abusive marriage, poverty, raised 3 kids while building her own modeling and nutrition career. She's basically superhuman. And I think, subconsciously, I've been looking for someone like her, someone with that kind of strength, that resilience. But here's what I'm only now realizing. I'm not looking for someone to save me or fix me or even understand me completely. I'm looking for someone brave enough to love me while I'm still figuring myself out. Someone who won't run when I'm difficult, who won't take it personally when I get lost in my head, who understands that my brain is both my greatest gift and my most profound curse. There was this girl I dated years ago, before the real fame hit, before Tesla became Tesla. We were lying in bed one Sunday morning, no alarms, no meetings, just us. And she turned to me and said, "You know what I love about you? Right now, in this moment, you're just Elon, not the CEO, not the innovator. Just you." And I remember feeling this surge of panic because I didn't know who just Elon was. I'd spent so long building this identity around achievement and progress that without it, I felt like I disappeared. I think I said something like, "Well, just Elon is pretty boring," trying to make a joke. But she saw through it. She touched my face and said, "No, he's not. He's just scared." She was right. We broke up 6 months later. The work got in the way, it always does. Sometimes late at night, I scroll through photos on my phone, pictures of my kids, old photos from when I was married, group shots from company events where I'm smiling but my eyes look distant. And I play this game where I try to identify the exact moment in each relationship where I checked out emotionally. It's like watching a thriller where you know the killer is in the room but you can't figure out which character it is. Except the killer is me, and the victim is also me, and somehow everyone I love gets caught in the crossfire. That sounds dramatic, I know. But at 3 a.m., when you're alone with your thoughts, and you've failed at marriage more times than you've succeeded, drama starts to feel like just honesty with better lighting. Here's a secret that'll probably make you understand me better, or maybe just feel sorry for me. I rehearse conversations. Not business pitches or investor presentations. I've got those down cold. I mean personal conversations. Before a date, I'll literally script out possible topics, interesting things to say, questions to ask, as if human connection is just another engineering problem to solve. If she mentions her family, pivot to this. If there's a lull, deploy interesting fact about physics. It's pathetic, really. I'm trying to hack intimacy using the same logical framework I use to design rockets. And you know what? It never works. Because the moments that actually matter, the real connections, they happen in the unscripted spaces. They happen when you're vulnerable and unprepared and honest. All the things I'm terrible at. I've been thinking a lot lately about what I actually need in a partner. Not what looks good on paper, not what makes sense to the public, not what fits into my schedule, but what my soul actually craves. And I keep coming back to this. I need someone who understands that loving me means loving someone who's not fully present, who's always got part of his consciousness in the future, solving problems that don't exist yet. But I also need someone brave enough to pull me back to earth, to remind me that life is happening right now, not just in some optimized future we're building toward. I need someone who won't compete with my companies for my attention but won't accept being perpetually second place either. Is that possible? Can that person exist? Or am I asking for someone to love a contradiction? When my son Nevada died, he was just 10 weeks old. SIDS took him from us without warning. I did something that haunts me to this day. I went back to work almost immediately. People praised me for being strong, for pushing through, for not letting tragedy stop progress. But it wasn't strength. It was cowardice. I couldn't face the grief, couldn't sit with my wife in our shared pain, couldn't let myself break because I was terrified that if I started breaking, I'd never stop. So I turned it into fuel. I channeled everything into the companies, told myself I was honoring him by building the future, by pushing humanity forward. But really, I was just running. And my marriage paid the price. How do you hold someone in their grief when you can't even acknowledge your own? There's this thing that happens when you're successful at my level. People stop being real with you. They agree with you too quickly, laugh at jokes that aren't funny, never tell you when you're being an idiot or an asshole or just plain wrong. You become isolated by your own success. So when I do meet someone who challenges me, who calls me on my bullshit, who treats me like a human rather than a deity or a bank account, it's intoxicating. But then my life, the security details, the constant travel, the public scrutiny, the death threats, yes, those are real, becomes their life too. And I watch this incredible person slowly get compressed into a smaller version of themselves to fit into my world. I've seen it happen, I've caused it to happen, and I hate myself for it every single time. But here's what happened 3 years ago. The thing I haven't told anyone. The thing that changed everything. We had a Starship test that exploded on the launch pad. Total loss, tens of millions of dollars, months of work, just gone. And I was standing there watching the fireball, and instead of immediately pivoting to problem-solving mode, instead of calling the team together to analyze what went wrong, I just stood there and cried. Not because of the rocket, we've had plenty of failures, that's part of innovation. I cried because, in that moment of watching something I'd built explode, I finally understood what I'd been doing to every relationship in my life. I'd been building these intricate, beautiful things, connections, marriages, families, and then I'd been the explosion. My ambition, my workaholism, my emotional unavailability, just detonating everything beautiful I'd managed to create. And that's when I realized, my future wife, whoever she is, wherever she is, she needs to know all of this. Not the curated version, not the quirky billionaire with a soft side story that makes for good PR. She needs to know that I'm damaged in ways that money can't fix. She needs to know that I'll disappoint her. That there will be anniversaries where I'm on a different continent, birthdays where I'm distracted by a crisis that could have waited but my brain won't let it wait. She needs to know that loving me is signing up for something genuinely difficult. But she also needs to know something else, something I'm only now beginning to understand myself. She needs to know that despite all of this, the emotional baggage, the failed marriages, the workaholic tendencies, the childhood trauma, I haven't given up on love. That terrifies me to admit, because hope feels dangerous. Hope feels like setting yourself up for another failure, another public divorce, another round of feeling like you're fundamentally incapable of the one thing that actually matters. But what if? What if there's someone out there who sees all of this mess, all of this contradiction, all of this broken machinery, and doesn't run? What if vulnerability isn't weakness but actually the bravest thing I could offer? What if the thing my future wife needs to know most isn't about my flaws at all, but about my willingness to keep trying despite them? And there's something else. Something that happened during those silent moments after the explosion that I'm still trying to fully understand. You want to know what I realized while standing there watching that rocket burn? The failure wasn't the explosion. The failure was that my first instinct, even before the tears came, was to calculate the financial loss. $78 million. I had that number in my head before I even processed the fact that 2 years of my team's lives had just turned to ash and smoke. That's who I've become. A man who quantifies everything, who turns even catastrophe into data points, who measures his own humanity in metrics and milestones. And that's exactly what I've been doing in every relationship I've ever had. I've been calculating, running cost-benefit analyses on love, measuring emotional return on investment. As if the human heart is just another system to optimize. Here's what I've never told anyone. I have Asperger's. I announced it on Saturday Night Live like it was a fun fact, a quirky personality trait that explains why I'm awkward sometimes. But that was me doing what I always do, turning something profound and painful into a punchline so I don't have to actually deal with it. The truth is, trying to navigate emotional intimacy with my brain is like trying to breathe underwater. Everyone else seems to have gills. They're swimming naturally through these currents of unspoken feelings and subtle social cues, and I'm just drowning, slowly, politely, while pretending everything's fine. I remember this moment with Grimes, and I'm not trying to air private details, but this one thing, it crystallized everything. She just had a C-section. Our son was born. And I was sitting there in the hospital room, and my brain latched onto this problem about his name. XAA12. How to pronounce it, the legal implications of certain characters, the symbolic meaning of each element, and I started texting her about it, about capitalization preferences and pronunciation keys. While she was lying there, recovering from major surgery, having just brought our child into the world, she looked at me with this expression I'll never forget, not anger, not even disappointment, just this sad recognition, like she'd finally seen the full extent of what she'd signed up for. That's my pattern, that's what I do. When emotions run highest, when vulnerability is most required, my brain stages a coup. It says, absolutely not, we're not doing feelings right now. Here's an intellectual problem instead. Much safer. Let's solve this. And I listen. I always listen. Because, Intellectual problems have solutions. Emotional problems? Those are infinite. They don't resolve. They require you to sit in discomfort, to tolerate ambiguity, to be present with pain, and I've built a very sophisticated, very expensive machine to avoid doing exactly that. My future wife needs to know that when I'm obsessing over rocket propulsion systems at 2 in the morning, I'm not just passionate about space travel. I'm avoiding something. Usually avoiding sitting with the feeling that I'm failing as a father, as a partner, as a human being who's supposed to know how to just be with people, without turning everything into a project. I have 12 children. 12. That's nearly enough for a hockey team. And how present have I been? Really present, not just financially supportive or occasionally visiting, but actually there in the mundane, beautiful, terrifying work of raising humans? The honest answer makes me sick to my stomach. My son Nevada, I mentioned him in part 1, how he died, and I went back to work. But here's what I didn't say. I've never properly grieved him, not once. It's been over 20 years, and I've never let myself sit with that loss, never let myself fully break over it. Instead, I had more children. 5 sons with my first wife through IVF, then more with others. And somewhere in my broken logic, I think I believed I could engineer my way around grief. Can't process the loss of one child? Have more children. Problem solved. Except it's not solved. It's never solved. That pain is still there, frozen in time, waiting for me to finally be brave enough to acknowledge it. And in the meantime, I'm raising all these kids, while carrying this unprocessed trauma like a backpack full of rocks that I've just decided is part of my weight now. There was this night, I think it was about 4 years ago, when I was alone in the Tesla factory. We were going through production hell with the Model 3, and I'd been sleeping on the factory floor for weeks. Not as some publicity stunt, but because I literally couldn't leave. If I left, if I went home to an empty house, I'd have to face the fact that I'd engineered myself into a corner. I'd built companies that required me to sacrifice everything else, and then I'd turned around and been surprised when everything else disappeared. I was lying there on a conference room floor at 4 in the morning, using a rolled-up jacket as a pillow, and I was crying. Just quietly crying in the dark. Not about the production problems, those were solvable. I was crying because I'd gotten exactly what I wanted. I'd built incredible things, changed industries, advanced humanity, and I was utterly, completely alone. You know what the worst part was? The next morning, I got up, splashed water on my face, and went right back to work. Smiled for the team, projected confidence, made decisions, pushed forward, because that's what I've trained myself to do. Compartmentalize. Put the pain in a box. Deal with it later. Except, later has become never. And I've got this whole warehouse of boxes full of unprocessed emotion that I'm just stepping around every day, pretending they're not there. My future wife needs to understand something critical. When I'm difficult, when I'm distant, when I'm cold or distracted or choosing work over her for the 1000th time, it's not because she's not enough. God. It's never been about that. Every woman I've ever loved has been extraordinary, brilliant, talented, patient beyond reason. The problem has never been them. It's me. It's that I'm fundamentally terrified that if I let someone all the way in, if I let down every wall and show them the full catastrophe of who I am underneath all the achievement, they'll do what my father did. They'll confirm my deepest fear, that I'm unlovable at my core. So I create distance preemptively. I choose work over presence. I turn every relationship into a situation where I can point to external factors when it fails. The company needed me. Mars needs us. The timeline was critical. All technically true. All conveniently deflecting from the real truth. I'm sabotaging things because rejection is less painful when you cause it yourself. If I make her leave by being unavailable, by being difficult, by being married to my companies first, then I never have to risk her discovering the real me and choosing to leave anyway. I've been in therapy, by the way. Multiple times. With multiple therapists. Some great, some terrible, all ultimately unable to crack this thing in me that's broken. One therapist told me I treat relationships like I treat companies. If one fails, start another one, apply lessons learned, iterate toward success. She said it like it was an observation. I heard it like an indictment. Because she was right. I've married and divorced the same woman twice. Tallulah Riley. Married, divorced, married again, divorced again. What does that tell you? It tells you I'm either insane or desperate or so fundamentally incapable of being alone that I'll repeat the same mistakes twice, rather than sit with myself for 5 minutes. Here's a memory that encapsulates everything. I was maybe 8 years old, sitting in my room reading science fiction because that's what I did. I read to escape. And my father came in, drunk, angry about something that had nothing to do with me, but I was available to absorb his rage. He went on this tirade about how I was weird, how I'd never have friends, how I lived in my head because reality was too much for me. And even as a kid, I remember thinking, he's right, not about being weird, I didn't care about that, but about reality being too much. People were too unpredictable. Their emotions were like weather systems I couldn't forecast, so I retreated further into books, into ideas, into worlds that made sense, and I never left. I'm 40-something years old, running multiple companies, dating some of the most famous women on earth, and I'm still that 8-year-old hiding in ideas because people are too scary. My future wife needs to know that, when she finds me lost in thought, staring at nothing, unresponsive to her voice calling my name, I'm not ignoring her. I'm back in that room. I'm still trying to solve the puzzle of how to be human in a way that doesn't hurt so much. The thing about Twitter, now X, that nobody understands is why I bought it. Sure, I talked about free speech and public discourse and taking it private, all true. But you want to know the real reason? I was lonely. I spent years on that platform, connecting with millions of people through memes and ideas and arguments, feeling less alone in those digital interactions than I felt in my actual life. And some part of me thought, if I own this place, if I control this space where I feel most comfortable communicating, maybe I can finally build something that doesn't leave me. How pathetic is that? $44 billion spent on a loneliness fix. And it didn't work. Of course it didn't work. Because the problem isn't external. It's not that I haven't found the right person or the right platform or the right configuration of life circumstances. The problem is internal. It's that I've spent my entire existence building elaborate external structures to avoid doing internal work. Every company is a cathedral built to distract from the fact that the architect is falling apart. My mother asks me sometimes, when are you going to slow down? When are you going to just enjoy what you've built? And I don't have the heart to tell her, never. I'm never going to slow down. Because slowing down means feeling, and feeling means facing everything I've been running from since I was a kid. The loneliness, the sense of not belonging anywhere. The fear that all of this, the companies, the wealth, the accomplishments, is just elaborate compensation for being fundamentally defective at the most basic human task, connecting with another person. I dated Amber Heard. That was public, messy, painful. She said in an interview that I was really nice, but the relationship was brutal because of my schedule. She's not wrong. But here's what she didn't say, what she probably didn't even realize. I used the schedule as a shield. When things got too intimate, too real, too close to actual vulnerability, suddenly there was an urgent SpaceX issue. A Tesla emergency. Something that required me to be on a plane to another state, another country, another planet, if I could have managed it. And I'd look at her with these apologetic eyes and say, I'm so sorry, but this is critical, and I'd mean it. In that moment, I genuinely believed it was critical. But it wasn't. Or it was, but not more critical than the relationship I was slowly starving to death through absence. Here's the thing about being me that my future wife needs to understand. I don't know how to want things small. I don't know how to care about something casually. It's full obsession or nothing. And right now, my obsessions are companies and missions and saving humanity from extinction. Where does romantic love fit in that hierarchy? Honestly, I don't know. And that uncertainty, that inability to promise you'll be my top priority, it's probably the most honest thing I can offer, which is a terrible thing to offer someone you're asking to build a life with you. I'm sitting here now, and I can feel it happening again. That pull toward work, toward solving, toward doing literally anything, except continuing to be honest about how broken my relationship machinery is. There's an email I could answer, a design I could review, a tweet I could send that would feel like connection without requiring actual vulnerability. And my future wife needs to know. This pull, this addiction, it never stops. She'll be mid-sentence telling me about her day, and she'll see my eyes glaze over. She'll know I've left her, that I'm somewhere in my head solving a problem that feels more manageable than the problem of being present. Is it fair to ask someone to love that? To love someone who's physically there maybe 30% of the time, emotionally there maybe 10%, and fully present maybe 1% if she's lucky? The math is terrible. The proposition is insulting. And yet I keep hoping someone will say yes. Not because they don't understand what they're signing up for, but because they do. Because they see all of this mess and think, yeah, that's complicated, but so am I. And maybe complicated together is better than simple and alone. But there's something else. Something I realized during that week. I canceled all my meetings, turned off my phone, sat with the silence I've been avoiding my entire life. Something that changed how I understand not just love, but my entire approach to being human. And it terrified me more than any business failure, any public controversy, any rocket explosion ever could. Because what I discovered in that silence wasn't just about what's wrong with me. It was about what I'm actually looking for. And it's not what I thought. It's something I've been too afraid to even name, let alone pursue. The silence was deafening. That's not just a phrase. I mean, it literally felt like the absence of noise had weight, had pressure, was physically crushing me. I was at one of my houses, doesn't matter which one because they're all equally empty when I'm alone in them, and I'd done this thing I never do. I'd told my assistants no meetings for a week. I'd turned off my phone, actually powered it down, not just put it on silent. I'd left my laptop in another room, and I just sat there, on a Tuesday afternoon, in complete silence. And within 15 minutes, I was having what I can only describe as a panic attack. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking, I felt like the walls were closing in, and the only thing that had changed was that I'd stopped running. That's when I understood, I'm not just a workaholic. I'm not just driven or ambitious or passionate about my mission. I'm an addict, and my drug of choice is distraction. Every email, every meeting, every rocket launch, every tweet, they're all just hits. Little doses of not having to face myself. And I'd just gone cold turkey without realizing how dependent I'd become. So I did something I haven't done since I was a child. I sat on the floor, just sat down on the hardwood floor in my living room, and I let myself feel everything. Every feeling I'd been postponing, every emotion I'd labeled deal with later, every bit of pain I'd converted into productivity. And my future wife needs to know what came up, because it's the truth underneath all the achievement, all the bravado, all the tweets and memes and public persona. What came up was this. I'm looking for someone who doesn't exist, and it's destroying any chance I have at happiness. Let me explain. In my head, I've built this composite person. She's brilliant, like, truly intellectually intimidating. She can keep up with me when I'm talking about first principles or physics or the technical challenges of making life multiplanetary. She challenges my ideas, makes them better, sees angles I miss. But she's also emotionally sophisticated in ways I'm not. She can read social situations I completely misunderstand. She can be present in moments where I'd normally be in my head. She's independent, has her own career, her own identity, doesn't need me for anything except that she wants me, and she's okay with my chaos. The constant travel, the public scrutiny, the fact that I'm essentially raising a small village of children from multiple relationships. She's not just okay with it, she finds it fascinating. Oh, and she needs to be beautiful. Not in a conventional way necessarily, but in a way that makes me forget about engineering problems when I look at her. And she should be funny, and kind, and tough enough to handle my moods, and soft enough to break through my walls, and patient but not too patient because I need someone who'll call me on my bullshit, and understanding but not so understanding that I can take advantage of it. You see the problem? I'm not looking for a person, I'm looking for a miracle. I'm looking for someone who can be everything I'm not, while also accepting everything I am. And that person doesn't exist. But here's the darker truth I discovered in that silence. Even if she did exist, even if this perfect woman walked into my life tomorrow and ticked every impossible box, I'd probably sabotage it. Because what I'm really afraid of isn't being alone. What I'm really afraid of is being known. Fully, completely known. And still being alone. That's the nightmare scenario. Someone sees all of me, not the curated version, not Elon Musk the innovator and entrepreneur, but the actual person underneath, with all his damage and weirdness and emotional incapacity, and they choose to leave. That would confirm the thing I've believed about myself since my father first told me I was worthless. That the core of me is unlovable. So I keep the core hidden. I show them the rockets, the vision, the charm when I can muster it, the intensity, the intelligence. I show them carefully selected pieces of vulnerability enough to seem human, not enough to be actually seen. And then, when they leave, which they always do, I can tell myself, well, they didn't really know me. They loved an idea of me. The real me is still safe, still hidden, still unrejected, because it was never actually offered up for rejection in the first place. My future wife needs to know that this is what she's up against. Not other women, not my companies, not even my ambitious timeline for getting to Mars. She's up against my own self-protection mechanisms that are so deeply ingrained I sometimes can't tell the difference between them and my actual personality. When I'm being difficult, there's a part of me that's doing it on purpose, testing, pushing, seeing if she'll stay even when I'm at my worst. Because if she stays through that, maybe, possibly, I can trust that she might stay through the real stuff. I've brought women into my world, and I've watched it crush them. The paparazzi, the constant speculation, every dinner photographed, every outing analyzed, conspiracy theories about whether they're with me for money or fame, death threats from crazy people who think they should be with me instead, and that's just the public stuff. Privately, there's the fact that my family situation is complicated. Multiple ex-wives, multiple kids, custody arrangements, scheduling nightmares. There's the security protocols, you can't just go for a spontaneous walk. There's the fact that my houses feel more like museums or hotels than homes because I'm never in them long enough to actually live in them. I remember Tallulah, my second wife. Or my third and fourth wife if you count that we married twice trying to decorate one of the houses. She wanted to make it feel like a home, add personal touches, create warmth. And I couldn't engage with it. Not because I didn't care about her effort, but because making a house feel like a home required me to believe I deserved a home. Required me to believe I was the kind of person who got to have cozy, warm, stable domesticity. And I don't believe that. I believe I'm the kind of person who sleeps on factory floors and works through holidays and measures his worth by how much he's advancing humanity. There's no room for throw pillows in that equation. She tried so hard. Both times we were married, she really tried. And I loved her, I still care about her deeply, but I couldn't be what she needed. She needed a husband who came home at reasonable hours, who was present during dinner, who could take a vacation without checking email every 20 minutes. And I needed... what? What did I need? I needed someone who could exist as a satellite around my life's work without needing me to orbit back. Which is not a marriage. That's just having a very patient employee you occasionally sleep with. Here's something that'll make you understand how broken my thinking is. I once calculated how many hours per year I could allocate to a relationship while still meeting my professional obligations. I literally made a spreadsheet. Assumed 8 hours of sleep per night, though I usually get less subtracted work hours, travel time, time with kids, exercise, meals, and I came up with this number of available hours for a romantic partner. Then I divided that by 52 weeks to get hours per week. It was pathetic, single digits. And my thought wasn't, this is insufficient, I need to rebalance my life. My thought was, how do I find someone who can build a relationship on this amount of time? That's not romance. That's not love. That's project management. That's me trying to optimize human connection the same way I'd optimize a supply chain. And my future wife deserves to know that this is how my brain works. When she's upset that I missed her birthday dinner because of a launch delay, part of me will genuinely not understand why she's upset, because in my mental spreadsheet, I allocated time for her that week. It was Tuesday lunch, not Thursday dinner, but the total hours were accounted for. Why does it matter which specific hours? See, I'm insane. I'm trying to love people using a framework designed for manufacturing efficiency. My mother and I love my mother. She's one of the few people who's seen all versions of me and hasn't left. She's tried to tell me this for years. She said, Elon, you can't schedule love. You can't optimize intimacy. Some things require you to be inefficient, to waste time, to just be present without an agenda. And intellectually, I understand that. I can acknowledge the truth of it. But emotionally, practically, I don't know how to do it. It feels like someone telling me to breathe underwater. Sure, it would be great if I could, but I'm not built for it. And here's where it gets really twisted. I resent needing love at all. There's a part of me that's angry at myself for not being able to just exist as pure ambition and intellect. For having these messy human needs for connection and intimacy. If I could take a pill that eliminated my desire for romantic love, I'd consider it. Because love makes me weak. It distracts me. It hurts me. Every relationship I've had has ended in some degree of pain, and the logical part of my brain keeps saying, stop doing this. You're bad at it. Focus on what you're good at. But I can't. Because I'm human, even though sometimes I wish I weren't. I've built companies that have fundamentally changed industries. Tesla proved electric cars could be better than gas cars in every way. SpaceX made reusable rockets when everyone said it was impossible. Neuralink is working on interfacing human brains with computers. These are hard problems, but they're solvable. You apply enough intelligence, enough resources, enough persistence, and you break through. But love? How do you engineer your way through that? How do you disrupt your own emotional unavailability? How do you iterate your way toward being the kind of person who can sustain a healthy long-term relationship? I don't have the answer, and that drives me crazy. It literally keeps me up at night. I'll be lying in bed, alone, and I'll be running through relationship postmortems like they're failed product launches. What went wrong? What were the key failure points? What could I have done differently? And I always come to the same conclusion. The failure point is me. I'm the rocket that keeps exploding. I'm the design flaw that keeps causing system failures, and unlike actual rockets, I can't just scrap the design and start over with version 2. My future wife, needs to know that she's signing up to love someone who may be fundamentally incapable of giving her what she deserves. Not because I don't want to God, I want to so badly. I want to be the person who shows up, who remembers anniversaries without an assistant reminding me, who can sit through dinner without mentally redesigning battery architecture. I want to be present, but wanting it and being able to do it are two entirely different things. And I've failed enough times to know that good intentions don't mean much when you're genetically wired to avoid emotional intimacy. There's this moment that haunts me. I was with someone I really cared about, doesn't matter who. This isn't about exposing her. It's about exposing me, and we were having this fight. She was crying, telling me she felt invisible, that I looked at rockets with more love than I looked at her, and I stood there, watching her cry, and the loudest thought in my head was about a technical problem we were having with heat shields. Not, how do I comfort her? Not, how did I hurt this person I care about? But a fucking technical problem. And she saw it. She saw me leave her in the middle of our fight. And she said something I'll never forget. I'm not even losing you to another woman. I'm losing you to your own head. And I can't compete with that. She was right. How do you compete with someone's entire internal world? How do you pull someone out of their head when their head is where they feel safest? My future wife needs to be prepared for this. For the fact that her biggest rival won't be another person. It'll be my own tendency to retreat into problems that feel solvable, to hide in work that makes sense, to choose the comfort of achievement over the discomfort of intimacy. And here's what I'm most afraid to admit. What I discovered in that week of silence that changed everything. I don't actually know if I want to change. Part of me does, the part that's lonely, that watches other people have seemingly normal relationships and wonders what that's like. But another part of me is terrified of changing because my work is the only thing I've ever been truly good at. What if I become more emotionally available and suddenly I lose my edge? What if being present and balanced means I stop being the person who can will impossible things into existence? What if the cost of being a good partner is no longer being great at what I do? That's the real fear. That's the thing keeping me trapped in this pattern. I'm afraid that love and greatness are mutually exclusive, at least for me. That I have to choose, and I've chosen greatness every single time because it's safer, more measurable, more controllable. You can see greatness in revenue and rocket launches and cars on the road. Love is invisible, unmeasurable, and terrifyingly subjective. What if I sacrifice everything for love, and the person still leaves? At least with rockets, if they explode, I can figure out why and fix it. But sitting there in that silence, day 3 of no distractions, something cracked open in me. A realization so obvious I'm embarrassed it took me this long to see it. And it changes everything I thought I knew about what I'm actually looking for in a partner, in myself, in life. It's not what I expected. It's not some grand romantic revelation about finding the right person. It's something else entirely. Something that makes me both hopeful and absolutely terrified, because if I'm right about this, it means every relationship I've had has been built on a faulty foundation. And my future wife, she needs to hear this part most of all, because it's the truth I've been running from my entire adult life. The truth I discovered in that silence, the one that broke me open and put me back together differently, is this. I don't need someone to complete me. I need someone who's brave enough to witness me being incomplete. For my entire adult life, I've been searching for a woman who could fill the holes in me, the emotional intelligence I lack, the presence I can't sustain, the warmth that doesn't come naturally. I've been looking for someone to make me whole, and that's been the problem all along, because no one can do that. No one should have to do that. And asking someone to do that is setting them up for failure before they even begin. What I actually need, what terrifies me to even say out loud, is someone who can look at me, at all my jagged edges and missing pieces and poorly patched wounds, and say, yeah, I see all of that. And I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to love you while you figure out how to fix yourself. That's a completely different proposition. That requires me to stop hiding, stop pretending I've got it all figured out, stop performing competence in areas where I'm actually drowning. It requires me to be honest about the fact that at 50-something years old, I'm still learning basic lessons about being human that most people figured out in their 20s. Here's what happened on day 5 of that silent week. I was sitting in my living room, and I started thinking about my kids, all 12 of them, and I realized I've been doing the same thing with them that I do with romantic partners. I've been trying to optimize fatherhood instead of actually being a father. I schedule time with them. I plan educational activities. I think about their future, about what resources and opportunities I can provide. But how often do I just sit with them? How often do I let them be bored in my presence, let conversations meander without purpose, be useless together? Almost never. Because usefulness is my default setting. Efficiency is my comfort zone, And love, real love, the kind that matters, is neither useful nor efficient. My future wife needs to know that I'm going to fail at this. Repeatedly, I'm going to have breakthrough realizations, and then forget them 3 days later when there's a crisis at one of the companies. I'm going to promise to be more present, and then disappear into my work for weeks at a time. I'm going to hurt her feelings in ways I genuinely don't understand because my brain processes social interaction like it's debugging code. But here's what's different now. Here's what changed in that silence. I'm not going to pretend anymore. I'm not going to hide behind the excuse of being busy or needed or essential to saving humanity. I'm going to admit the truth. I'm afraid. I'm damaged. I'm trying. And I'm probably going to keep failing. But I want to fail forward. I want to fail with someone instead of failing alone. You know what the loneliest moment of my life was? It wasn't after a divorce. It wasn't sleeping on a factory floor. It was last year, standing on stage at a SpaceX event, announcing another successful milestone, listening to thousands of people cheer, and realizing that not one person in that crowd knew me. Not really. They knew Elon Musk, the idea, the brand, the ambitious madman shooting for Mars. But the actual person underneath? The one who goes home and eats dinner alone? The one who sometimes sits in his car for 20 minutes in the garage before going inside because he's trying to remember how to switch from work mode to human mode? That person was completely unknown, and I'd engineered it that way. I'd built this fortress of achievement to keep people at exactly the right distance, close enough to not be physically alone, far enough away that they couldn't actually see me. My father did a number on me. I've mentioned him before, but I need to be more honest about the damage. He didn't just criticize me or call me names. He was systematically cruel in a way that taught me that vulnerability equals pain. Every time I showed emotion as a kid, it was weaponized against me. Every time I cared about something, it became a target. So I learned to not care, or at least to never show that I cared. I learned to compartmentalize, to bury feelings so deep that even I couldn't find them. And that survival mechanism that protected child me is now destroying adult me's ability to connect with people. I need my future wife to understand that when I shut down emotionally, when I go cold and distant and retreat into work, I'm not choosing that consciously. It's an automatic response, like flinching when someone raises their hand near your face. My nervous system learned that emotional exposure leads to pain, and it's trying to protect me, even when there's no actual threat, even when she's safe, even when shutting down is the thing that's actually causing the harm. Unlearning that, rewiring decades of trauma responses, that's harder than any technical challenge I've ever faced, but I'm trying. Or I want to try, or I want to try. I'm somewhere in that progression, and I need someone patient enough to let me figure out which stage I'm actually in. Here's something I've never admitted publicly. I'm jealous of normal people. People who can work their 8 hours, come home, have dinner with their family, watch TV, go to bed, and feel fulfilled. People who don't have this gnawing sense that they're supposed to be doing something more, something bigger, something that justifies their existence. I've built multiple billion-dollar companies, and I still go to bed most nights feeling like I didn't do enough, like I'm falling behind some impossible standard that exists only in my head. How do you have a relationship with someone like that? How do you build a life with someone who's never satisfied, who's always chasing the next thing, who can't just be happy with what is? My future wife would be signing up to love someone who's constitutionally incapable of contentment, and I need to be honest about what that means practically. It means vacations where I'm distracted. It means milestone moments where I'm physically present but mentally solving problems. It means she'll sometimes feel like she's competing with the future of humanity for my attention, and that's not a competition she can win. Because in my broken calculus, individual happiness, including my own, always comes second to the mission. Always. Is that noble? Or is it just cowardice dressed up as ambition? I genuinely don't know anymore. But here's what I do know, what became crystal clear during that week of silence. I can't keep doing this alone. Not because I need someone to complete me, but because isolation is killing me slowly. I've achieved more than most people dream of, and I'm emptier than I've ever been. That's not humble bragging or fishing for sympathy. It's just the mathematical reality of my life. All output, no input, all giving to projects and companies and missions, nothing coming back in the form of real human connection. I'm running on fumes emotionally, and I've been running on fumes for so long I forgot what it feels like to actually have a full tank. My future wife, and maybe she's reading this, maybe she's out there somewhere thinking these same thoughts from a different angle, she needs to know that I'm not a project. I'm not a fixer-upper. I'm not some misunderstood genius who just needs the right woman to unlock my emotional potential. I'm a deeply flawed human being who's done extraordinary things while failing spectacularly at ordinary things. And I'm finally at a point where I can admit that maybe, possibly, the extraordinary things don't matter as much as I've told myself they do. Maybe landing on Mars is meaningless if I'm landing there alone. Maybe changing the world doesn't mean anything if I can't figure out how to be present for one person. I think about my kids growing up and what they'll remember about their father. Will they remember that I was ambitious, that I built cool companies, that I was always working on the next big thing? Probably. Will they remember me being there for their recitals, their heartbreaks, their random Tuesday afternoons, when nothing special happened but presence was everything? Less likely. And that kills me. Because I know what it's like to have a father who was physically present sometimes but emotionally absent always, and I'm repeating the pattern. Not because I don't love them, I love them more than I know how to express, but because I don't know how to love them without turning it into a project, a plan, an optimization problem. This is what I want to tell my future wife, what I need her to hear, before she decides whether this is something she can sign up for. I'm not going to promise to change completely. I'm not going to tell you I'll suddenly become emotionally available and present, and all the things I failed to be in every previous relationship. I'm not going to lie and say work will stop being my primary identity, that I'll magically learn to turn off my brain and just be in the moment. Those are promises I can't keep, and I've broken enough promises to know that good intentions aren't enough. But here's what I can promise. I will try. Every single day, I will try to be braver than I was the day before. I will try to stay in conversations when every instinct tells me to retreat. I will try to let you see me actually see me, not the curated version, not the public persona, but the scared, broken, trying his best version. And when I fail, because I will fail constantly, I will try to be honest about it. I won't hide behind excuses or blame work or pretend I don't understand why you're upset. I'll try to just say, I'm scared, or I don't know how to do this, or I'm failing you and I don't know how to stop. That's not romantic. That's not the fairy tale proposal or the grand gesture. But it's real. And maybe real is what I've been missing this whole time. Maybe I don't need someone who's impressed by rockets and billions of dollars. Maybe I need someone who's impressed by the fact that I showed up to dinner on time, that I remembered what she said about her day, that I stayed present for 5 minutes without drifting into my head. Maybe the extraordinary doesn't matter if I can't figure out the ordinary. I've spent my life solving problems that don't exist yet, building things that seem impossible, pushing humanity forward, and I'm proud of that. I'm not going to apologize for my ambition or pretend I'm going to suddenly stop caring about Mars or sustainable energy or artificial intelligence. Those things matter to me. They're part of who I am. And anyone who loves me has to understand that they're not going to change. But what can change, what I desperately need to change, is the belief that those things are all I am, that my worth is tied only to my achievements, that love is optional but rockets are essential. My future wife needs to know that loving me means loving someone who's learning, very late in life, how to be human. Someone who's figuring out that vulnerability isn't weakness, that needing people isn't failure, that admitting you can't do it all alone isn't the same as giving up. I'm a slow learner when it comes to emotional stuff. I need patience, I need grace. I need someone who won't give up on me when I revert to old patterns, but who also won't enable those patterns or pretend they're okay. And here's the thing that gives me hope. The thing that came out of that week of silence. I think she's out there. Not the perfect woman I invented in my head, but a real woman with her own damage and dreams and difficulties. Someone who's also tired of pretending, who's also figured out that having it all together is a myth, who's also looking for someone brave enough to be a mess with her. Maybe she's been hurt by people who couldn't show up, maybe she's also too much in her head, maybe she's also hiding behind achievement or beauty or whatever her shield is. And maybe, just maybe, we can figure out how to put down our shields together. I don't know if that's naive. I don't know if at my age, with my history, with my particular brand of emotional damage, real change is even possible. But I know I can't keep doing what I've been doing. I can't keep building companies while my personal life crumbles. I can't keep telling myself that being alone is the price of greatness. I can't keep running from the one thing that might actually make all the other achievements mean something. So to my future wife, wherever you are, whoever you are, I'm not going to be easy. I'm going to be distracted and distant and difficult. I'm going to hurt your feelings without meaning to. I'm going to choose work over you sometimes, and I'm going to hate myself for it even as I'm doing it. I'm going to need you to be patient with me as I figure out how to be a partner instead of just a provider. I'm going to need you to call me back when I drift away, to remind me that us matters as much as Mars does, maybe more. But here's what you'll get in return. Someone who sees you, really sees you. Because the same brain that makes me terrible at social niceties makes me incredibly good at pattern recognition, at seeing what others miss. I'll notice the small things. I'll remember random facts about you that you mentioned once. I'll support your dreams with the same intensity I support my company's. I'll build things for you, solve problems for you, dedicate resources to making your life better in whatever way I can. And underneath all the awkwardness and emotional unavailability and workaholism, I'll love you with an intensity that maybe isn't always visible but is always there, running in the background like code that never stops executing. I'll never be the boyfriend who writes poetry or plans romantic surprises or remembers to say the right thing at the right time, but I'll be the person who sees your potential and helps you reach it. Who solves problems you didn't even know you had. Who builds a future that includes you not as an accessory to my life, but as a central part of it. Who keeps trying, even when trying feels impossible, because giving up on love means giving up on the one part of being human that money and success can't buy or fake or engineer. And maybe that's enough. Maybe love isn't about being perfect or even being good at it. Maybe it's just about finding someone whose damage is compatible with yours, whose dreams don't require you to be someone you're not, whose patience is deep enough to handle your learning curve. Maybe it's about two imperfect people deciding that imperfect together is better than perfect alone. I'm ready for that. Finally, after years of running and hiding and building walls, I'm ready to try. Not because I've figured it all out, but because I've finally accepted that I never will. And maybe that acceptance is the first real step toward being someone capable of love. Not the sanitized, romanticized version of love from movies, but the messy, difficult, beautiful, terrible reality of two people choosing each other every day despite all the reasons not to. So if you're out there, if you're reading this and thinking maybe, possibly, this broken, ambitious, emotionally stunted man trying to get humanity to Mars might be worth taking a chance on, I'm here. I'm scared. I'm going to mess this up in ways I can't even predict yet. But I'm here, and I'm trying. And I finally understand that trying is all any of us can really offer. The rest is just hope and patience and choosing love, even when it would be easier to choose literally anything else. That's the truth my future wife needs to know about me. Not that I'm perfect or fixed or suddenly capable of being the partner I've never been before, just that I'm finally willing to admit I want to be. And, sometimes, willingness is where everything begins.